A growing number of girls are joining gangs. The Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits just conducted a study on this topic. Let's take a look. There was a time when Elizabeth Campos walked the streets with a pack, girls and young men who enjoyed the gang lifestyle. Elizabeth was only 14 when she joined.
All my life growing up as a little girl, I didn't really receive a lot of attention from my parents.
The gang, she said, gave her the attention she was lacking, but it meant as many as 9 stints in juvenile hall and county jail.
The first time, I would say drunk in public. You know, I was young. I was just not doing the right thing.
A new study by the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits reports 1 in 10 gang members nationwide is a girl. In San Jose, there's been an increase of as much as 15% over the last decade.
The increase that we have seen is very alarming.
Vice Mayor Madison Wynn says even in these cash-strapped times, the city needs to invest more in gender-specific programs to target female gang members.
I think that if we can focus a little bit of funding and allocate our funding that we currently have right now toward programs that caters to girls participating in gang activities, I think that would be very helpful.
Last week, prosecutors in San Jose rolled out suspects who they say are 24 operatives of the Nuestra Familia prison gang. Among them were 7 females.
And basically that's when I just had a wake-up call knowing that I couldn't live the way I was living.
Elizabeth is a college student today. Her bright tattoos are virtually gone. She now spends her free time talking to other girls, urging them not to follow in her path as a teenager. Brave story by that young woman. Now with me here on Comunidad Del Valle are Rosana Alvarez and Ana Lilia Soto. They are both with a new organization, relatively new, called the Andariegas Collective. Welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for having us.
I want to get into the title of your group because I think it's pretty significant. But I mean, we saw Elizabeth's plight, living through the gang lifestyle and how she got in it and how she got out of it. What's happening right now, in your estimation, on the streets of Santa Clara County?
I think right now what we're seeing is just a lot of young girls who are more active, and it's actually not so recent news. I mean, it's been things that have been going on for the last 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. When I started at Mox in 2000, I was in the gang intervention unit, and I also did a program for young women. And what we saw was half of my participants in that gang intervention program called Street Reach were young women. So now it's a little bit more active. I'm thinking it's the climate because of we're seeing a lot more violence with the young men in our communities, and people are now starting to ask themselves, and it's been a question we've been asking for the last 10, 15 years, what about the young women? Who's helping them, who's targeting them, and how are we going to support them in navigating these families that we come from, and navigating our friends, our peers in that situation.
But Ana Lilia, that's important work that you all are doing. Tell us about the Andariega Collective, if you will, Rosana. How did it start? And my mom would call me an Andariego all the time, because not because I was never home, but because andas en la calle and whatnot.
Right.
Tell us about how that came about.
So it really is an acknowledgement of that callejero-ness, since you directed it at you as a young man. I'm quite surprised to hear that. You know, we heard it all the time as young women. Andas en la calle, ¿a qué horas vas a llegar? And mind you, this would be me being 3 houses down the block. So really our work as Mexican American Studies students, graduates in the program, conducting research, presenting at conferences, based on this philosophy that really women can take that sense of callejera-ness and do empowering and powerful work with that. So we became a research collective, and we wrote poems, we did arts-based work, we revamped programming at Mox Intervention Center. And so once we all kind of went our separate ways, we discovered that there was a gap in services, that really, in talking to other women that, you know, are probation officers, do social work, are in the classrooms, there isn't that gender responsive and culturally relevant approach that speaks to these young women that are constantly being called those callejeras. And so they start to believe all of the negative associations with that being out in the streets, and they start to empower themselves by negatively embracing that term. And so our work really became about taking everything that we had learned, everything that we had read and talked and practiced out in the community, and putting it in one solid place to meet that need and fill that gap. and take all of the negative experiences and be able to put them together in a way where we can reflect it back to the young women and also use our example and our personal stories to empower them to do more positive things while they are also an Andariega out in the world.
If you're wondering what to do with that master's degree in Chicano studies, here is an example of what you can do, actually. That program is very significant over at San Jose State University. In our next couple of segments, we're going to have a deputy district attorney who deals with gangs. Your job, however, is to make sure that the females you deal with do not get to her level.
Exactly.
Right.
How successful do you think you've been or you can be?
I think the notion of success is definitely different. I think we have to start looking at individuals. And have we been successful? Yes, we've been doing this work in the community for the last, since the year 2000. And we've been active in the community. And have we been able to help young women steer clear from the paths of the DAs? Yes, we have. Have some made mistakes and have followed those paths? Yes. But one of the things that really is different from us and our organization is that even when they make mistakes, we're still there. So we're supportive. We help them find the lawyers. We've helped them navigate that process. We ask them to acknowledge lessons and to be able to develop resiliency, not to make those mistakes again. So that's a big notion of success right there. And that's what's happened. So I've had young women who have ended up in Elmwood, have been released, have worked in the community, and are now doing the kind of work that we're doing with our own curriculum. So that's beautiful work.
And they
right
know what
there.
they're talking about. They
Definitely.
walk the walk and talk. Well, again, let me show you a couple of websites. So one is for the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits. That's where you can get this report that they just came out with. And the other website is for the Andariegas Project. And there it is. We'll be back and get more in depth on the problem of girls in gangs when we continue. Stay with us. We are back here on Comunidad Del Valle talking about girls and gangs. We're chatting through the commercial break, but that's okay. There are a lot of issues that we need to get across. Go ahead and finish your conversation. You wanted to talk about something specifically.
Oh, I think when we start talking about Andariegas and this notion of the young women that we're working with and why we really went to this term and why we decided to personalize it ourselves is because it also talks about voice and agency and being able to declare space. And a lot of the young women that are involved in gangs are doing just that. Is it the most positive way? No, not yet. And I think our job is really to support in being able to help them navigate those skewed lessons of life. Like gangs, we hear about it a lot. They teach family, they teach loyalty, they teach connection, skewed definitions of that, negative definitions of that. And so it does become kind of part of our journey to support in using the terms that they know about, but really giving them the correct definitions of that. And also being able to support the development of voice and being assertive. And we don't have to be negative and violent to be assertive. We can stand up for ourselves using our own voice, declaring our own space. And it's a little different when we start talking about also like Mexican-American young ladies, because we have a very, traditional way of looking at things. And I think that's where Andariegas Collective kind of really came out from, because my mom still doesn't like the name, and she's like, why are you pushing that out? And we're like, it is about voice. It's about being able to stand for yourself. It's being able to define yourself. It's being able to just declare proudly that you're here and that you're going to move forward.
You can be a positive Andariega or Andariega.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be negative. Now, one thing that the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits is pushing is for there to be gender-specific programs in dealing with gangs, and those programs need to be funded. Talk about that significance and how that might help your work.
Well, first of all, there's also this almost a confusion around that request.
Right.
And sometimes we think that in order for these issues to get that funding, we have to shift the funding that's there. That's not what we're saying, so I wanted to make sure that was clear. What we are saying is that there needs to be more money invested in these resources throughout.
So don't take away from one to give to another.
Right, exactly. Because what's working is working, we might as well leave it in place, but there's also a gap in services. So let's address that gap and let's put more resources into the community, because ultimately what we're trying to do is create advocates for change in the long term, right? Some of these young women we might not see in 10 weeks turn their lives around, but we don't know where they'll be in 3 years. And there are indicators of that, and there are ways to do that. So really what we would like to see is more investment in those gender responsive and culturally relevant programs that let young women define what it is to be a young woman whether they want to be an Andariega or not, but that they have that choice. Because a lot of times what we see is a blaming of those families and of that tradition, and you know, it's a Mexican thing or it's a gang thing, and there's been 5 generations of gangs, so how's this person not going to be a gang member? And what we disregard in that conversation is the community accountability behind that, and how sometimes the stereotypes that we carry go on to that youth and they internalize those.
So you're not dismissing the family involvement in it or lack thereof,
Right.
but you're saying there are other things that are happening in that child's life that we should take into account.
There are other factors, and so let's address some of those factors so that we can help them set themselves up in the best way possible, so that if their choice is to do positive things in the community, they believe that they're capable of doing that.
Now, you just had what's called the Safe, you received a Safe Summer Initiative grant for your program called the Mayawel program. How did that go this summer?
It went beautiful. We had 15 to 16 young women who participated in the program.
You could have had more if
We
you
could have had
space
more.
and funding.
Exactly. It was as an Andariegas Collective, we've been active. We just formalized this last year, so we wanted to really just give ourselves the time to focus on these 12 young women. The 15 young women, as well as in the program. We had young women who were from the harder core, you know, the gang affiliated, to more higher functioning. And so we really like the mix of that, because I think as women, we work as a collective. We work with this notion of comadrazgo. So it really worked out in terms of allowing some of our other higher risk youth the possibilities of the opportunities that we have.
There is peer
To
help.
peer, exactly.
I mean, they help
Peer
each other, I
support,
would imagine.
Definitely. Yeah, some of these young women, I mean, they really became really engaged. They were coming from, we held the program at the Mexican Heritage Plaza. They were walking, so we had a young girl who walked from past Eastridge all the way to the Mexican Heritage Plaza. It would take her and her boyfriend 2 hours. She would bring her little brother in a baby stroller who was 6 years old, because she was going to watch him, but she was like, I'm not missing program.
That's how much she wants
That
to be.
is engagement.
That's
And you know, that helped us be a little bit more intentional having it at that location. The School of Arts and Culture, which has a range of artistic and cultural activities that instill this sense of pride, is housed at the Mexican Heritage, and they are in charge of those facilities. So we were very fortunate to have buy-in from them early on and to have their support on an ongoing basis.
That's what that place was meant to
Right.
serve as a community resource like that. My kids were in summer camp there for a couple of weeks this year. Let's show you that information once again for the Andariega Collective and the Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits. Log on to find out more, maybe how you can get involved in getting girls out of gangs. Thank you so much for the work that y'all are doing.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you
good
for
luck.
having us.
Thank you. Up next, around Comunidad Del Valle, an assistant DA who deals with gang members. Stay with us.